The store was a haven of luxury, nestled in the heart of the city, its windows gleaming under the bright lights that illuminated the busy street. Known for its rare designer pieces and extravagant jewels, it was a favorite among the elite, celebrities, high-powered business people, and anyone who could afford its sky-high prices. The polished marble floors, the sparkling chandeliers, and the plush velvet couches created an air of opulence that felt as though time had slowed down once you stepped inside. The store was quiet that afternoon, the usual hum of conversation muffled by the luxurious atmosphere. Soft classical music floated through the air, and the delicate scent of roses and vanilla wafted from the candles strategically placed throughout the store. It was a place where the world outside seemed far away, and only the well-dressed patrons mattered. I had worked there for 3 years, and though I was used to the glamorous setting, I still found myself in awe of the wealth that surrounded me every day. It was easy to lose track of time, to forget the chaos outside, as we catered to our rich clientele. Today was no different. There were only a few customers browsing through the designer handbags and fine jewelry, but none of them caught my attention more than one particular man who had just walked in. Johnny Depp. It wasn't like he was a stranger, he'd visited before, but every time he walked in, there was this undeniable buzz in the air. A ripple of recognition spread across the store as he strolled through the entrance, his signature cool demeanor and easy smile making him blend in as just another celebrity. But there was something magnetic about him. He didn't demand attention, but he had a way of drawing it without even trying. He casually moved past the displays, glancing at a few watches in the glass cases as though he was on a simple shopping trip, just like any other customer. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was an eerie calmness in the air that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I had been here long enough to know when something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And then it happened. The door swung open, and in rushed a group of men, their faces hidden behind black masks. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The robbers were quick, too quick. Their voices rang out sharply, demanding that everyone stay down and remain quiet. One of them brandished a gun, his eyes darting around the store as he barked orders. The cold metallic barrel of the weapon pointed straight at us, sending a chill down my spine. "Everyone get on the floor now," he shouted. "Give us the cash, the jewelry, everything, we want it all." The luxury store, once filled with elegance and grace, now felt like a cage. The customers were terrified, huddled together, some trembling, others frozen in disbelief. I could feel my breath catch in my throat, and my mind raced as I tried to figure out what to do. The noise of the robbers' shouts and the crashing of display cases filled the room, and all I could hear was the rapid beat of my heart. It was happening so fast. Johnny Depp, who had been standing near the watches, didn't flinch. His gaze locked on the robbers for a split second, a cool and measured expression on his face. There was no panic, no sign of fear, just an unsettling calm that contrasted with the chaos unfolding around us. It was almost as if he knew something none of us did. The air was thick with tension, and every passing second felt like an eternity. The robbers were focused on gathering their loot, ordering us to stay still as they pushed past the customers, shoving them aside to grab anything valuable within reach. My heart raced as I thought about how this could end, how badly it could go. I had to stay quiet. I had to stay still. But a voice in my head screamed that we weren't safe. Not yet. The robbers were no longer just shouting orders. They were growing more aggressive, their voices sharper, their movements erratic. I could feel the heat of their anger, the tension in the air thickening with every passing second. The gun that had once been pointed at the ceiling was now aimed at the customers. Their trembling hands held high in the air as they complied with the demands. "Move it, move it," one of them screamed, shoving a terrified elderly woman aside. Her glasses slipped from her face as she crumpled to the floor, and the sound of her sharp intake of breath filled the room. Another robber, his eyes wide with panic, ripped open a display case, grabbing handfuls of jewelry with shaking hands. The customers around me were barely making a sound, their eyes wide, filled with fear, not daring to make any sudden movements. The store had always been a place of wealth and power, but now it felt like a helpless prison. We were all trapped in the gleaming space of luxury, but there was nothing luxurious about it anymore. I tried to stay calm, but my heart raced, every nerve in my body screaming for me to act, to do something. The cold sweat on my palms was unbearable, and I could feel my knees beginning to shake. What if they decided to shoot someone to make an example of them? What if we didn't make it out alive? And then I remembered Johnny Depp. He was still standing in the same spot, near the watch section, his posture relaxed, almost too relaxed for someone in a situation like this. His dark sunglasses were still perched on his nose, and his expression, though neutral, gave off an air of someone observing, calculating, analyzing. I couldn't tell if he was being brave or if he was simply too composed to show any fear. One of the robbers, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, turned suddenly, his eyes locking onto Johnny. There was a flash of recognition, followed by a flicker of confusion. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop, and the atmosphere in the store shifted. The robber's grip on his weapon tightened, his body language changing as he approached Johnny. "Hey," the robber barked, pointing at Johnny. "You're that guy, aren't you?" Johnny didn't flinch. He simply looked at the robber, a faint smirk playing at the corners of his mouth, though his eyes remained steady and calm. He didn't say anything, but the look on his face was almost as if he were amused by the recognition. "Shut up and stay down," one of the other robbers yelled, his voice trembling. The man with the scar, however, seemed fixated on Johnny now, a wild look in his eyes as he took a few cautious steps forward. "Wait a minute, you're Johnny Depp," he said, his voice rising. "What's a guy like you doing here? You think you're too good for us, huh?" The air crackled with tension. For a moment the robbers seemed divided. One of them stepped forward to silence the man with the scar, but it was too late. The distraction had taken root. The moment of uncertainty in the robbers' ranks made everyone nervous. But instead of diffusing the situation, it only made things worse. The scar-faced robber, now agitated, lifted his gun, pointing it directly at Johnny, his finger twitching on the trigger. "Don't move," he shouted, his voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger, "or I'll put a bullet in you." My breath caught in my throat. The tension in the room reached a fever pitch. The weight of the gun aimed at Johnny so thick I could almost feel it pressing on my chest. My legs felt like they were turning to jelly, and I had to fight the urge to run, though there was nowhere to go. Johnny didn't move. His face remained stoic, calm, almost indifferent, like he was no longer part of the terrifying scene unfolding around him. The robber, still trembling, seemed thrown off by Johnny's lack of fear. My own heart raced as I stared at Johnny, willing him to do something, anything, that would stop this madness. But all he did was stand there, his gaze unwavering, as though the gun pointed at him didn't matter. I had never been so scared in my life. My body was frozen, my breath shallow. I could hear the sounds of other customers around me, stifled gasps and whispers of fear, but all I could focus on was the gun. The silence stretched out, pregnant with the threat of violence, and it seemed like every breath was too loud, too much. Johnny Depp, this man who had been so calm, so unshaken, was now the focus of the robbery. And I couldn't tell if that was a good thing or the beginning of something much worse. The situation had escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. The gun, still pointed at Johnny Depp, trembled in the robber's hand, his chest rising and falling with quick, shallow breaths. The tension in the store was so thick, it felt suffocating. I could feel the eyes of the other customers on me, and I knew I wasn't the only one terrified. Everyone was waiting for the next move, unsure of what might happen next. And then, just as the chaos reached its peak, Johnny Depp moved. It wasn't a dramatic movement, no heroic sprint or grand gesture, but it was enough to break the unbearable silence. Slowly, almost casually, Johnny took a few steps forward, his eyes never leaving the robber who was still pointing the gun at him. There was no sign of fear, no panic in his expression, just a calmness that seemed out of place in a situation like this. "Hey," Johnny said, his voice low but clear, cutting through the heavy air. "You don't want to do this." The robber, still holding the gun, looked at Johnny in confusion, his brow furrowed, unsure of what to make of the situation. The moment felt almost surreal. Here was Johnny Depp, the famous actor, speaking to a robber as though they were having a casual conversation, as though he wasn't staring down the barrel of a gun. "What's your name, huh?" Johnny asked, his voice smooth, almost friendly. The robber blinked, momentarily thrown off by the question. He wasn't expecting this, that much was clear. His grip on the gun tightened, but something in Johnny's calm demeanor seemed to make him second-guess himself. What?" the robber stammered, his voice wavering. Johnny's lips curled into a faint, almost disarming smile. "What's your name? You're making a huge mistake here, buddy. This isn't you. I can see it in your eyes." The robber hesitated, his eyes darting between Johnny and the others in the store. I could see the conflict building inside him. He hadn't expected this. No one had. Johnny was speaking to him like they were two old friends having a conversation over a drink. It was the last thing anyone would expect in such a high-pressure situation. "You think you're going to get away with this?" Johnny continued, his voice calm but firm. "You're not like this. I know what you're going through. I've been there too, but this isn't the way." I watched in awe as Johnny's words seemed to slowly disarm the robber, his grip on the gun loosening, his body language shifting. The other robbers who had been focused on grabbing jewelry and cash looked up, unsure of what was happening. The entire scene had shifted. What had been an overwhelming, violent situation was now something else. Something much less certain. I could feel my heart still pounding, but it was no longer from the fear of the gun aimed at Johnny. Now, I was holding my breath, trying to understand what Johnny was doing. Was he stalling for time? Was he buying us a chance to escape or get help? I noticed in the corner of my eye a subtle movement near the security desk. One of the staff members was discreetly reaching for a button under the counter, pressing it without drawing attention. The store's security was silently activating the emergency alarm, and I realized that they were calling the police without the robbers knowing. The robbers were distracted, caught off guard by Johnny's unexpected calm, and the timing was perfect. Johnny didn't take his eyes off the robber, his gaze steady and unwavering. It was like he was playing a game, except this wasn't a game. This was real. And yet, with every word, with every casual step forward, he seemed to gain control over the situation. "You don't want to do something you'll regret," Johnny said quietly, his tone almost empathetic now, as though he understood the robber's struggle, as though he'd been in his shoes before. "I know you've got options. This isn't the only way out." The robber was visibly shaken now, his body language betraying his confusion. He looked around, his attention darting to the others in the store, as though searching for reassurance. Johnny's words, his calmness, were disorienting him, causing him to second-guess everything he thought he was doing. In that moment, I realized something that sent a chill down my spine. Johnny Depp wasn't just a celebrity. He wasn't just a regular person caught up in an unfortunate situation. Johnny Depp was playing a role here, one I couldn't quite place at first. He had a plan. He wasn't reacting to the robbery, he was orchestrating the next move. The question wasn't if the robbers would get away with this, it was how Johnny was going to make sure they didn't. And that thought alone made the air feel even thicker with suspense. Just as the robbers seemed ready to make their escape, their hands full with stolen jewelry, cash, and expensive handbags, something unexpected happened. The air, which had been thick with fear and tension, suddenly shifted, and I could feel my pulse race as my mind scrambled to process what was happening. The scar-faced robber, still disoriented by Johnny's calming words, began to motion toward the exit, signaling to his partners that it was time to go. But before they could take another step, the store's lights flickered, and a series of low, almost imperceptible clicks echoed through the store. In an instant, hidden security personnel emerged from the shadows, their movements swift and deliberate. They appeared from behind display cases, from the doorways that led to the back rooms, and even from under the elegant rugs. I had no idea they were there, no idea that the store had been equipped with a covert team ready to take action. It was as though the entire store had become part of a carefully orchestrated plan. And then it hit me. Johnny Depp wasn't just a bystander. One of the security guards, dressed in plain clothes, quickly moved toward the robbers, and with swift precision, tackled one of them to the ground. The sound of scuffling filled the room, but the robbers, who had been so focused on their escape, were now blindsided. The entire scene turned chaotic in an instant, As more security personnel subdued the robbers, their hands quickly cuffed behind their backs. But it wasn't just the security team that had arrived. In the distance, I could hear the unmistakable sound of police sirens growing louder, signaling that the law enforcement officers were closing in. The timing was flawless. The robbers had been caught in a trap, one they hadn't seen coming. Johnny, who had remained eerily calm throughout the entire ordeal, stepped forward, his expression now revealing something entirely different. Something I hadn't expected. He was no longer the cool, collected man casually talking to a robber. He was the orchestrator of the whole thing. His eyes met mine for a brief moment, and the realization hit me like a wave. Surprised? Johnny's voice was calm, almost apologetic, as he addressed the stunned customers and staff. This wasn't a robbery. This was a setup. I blinked, my mind racing. A setup? What was he talking about? This had all seemed so real, too real to be anything but a robbery. Before anyone could respond, Johnny turned to face the robbers, who were now being restrained by the security team. "You were never going to get away," he said, his voice low but filled with authority. "I've been working with the police for weeks, setting this up to catch you and your crew." The customers around me murmured in disbelief, unsure of what to make of Johnny's words. Some looked at him with shock, while others seemed to process the gravity of the situation, the truth slowly sinking in. Was this a setup all along? How had we not known? Johnny took a deep breath before continuing, his gaze never wavering. This robbery was never meant to succeed. It was part of a larger operation to expose the robbery ring that's been plaguing this city for weeks. And you, my friends, were the key players. He motioned toward the robbers, whose faces were still filled with confusion and anger, unable to fully comprehend what had just happened. The robbers, now completely restrained, exchanged furious glares, but they didn't resist. They were caught. They were beaten at their own game, and there was nothing they could do to escape. "I'm part of an undercover operation," Johnny continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I've been working with the authorities to bring down the criminals running these robberies. It was the only way to get you all in one place. You never saw it coming." The room fell into stunned silence. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Johnny Depp, the man who had been so calm, so nonchalant during the entire situation, was actually an undercover agent working with the police? It sounded like something out of a movie, but it was happening right in front of me. I glanced around the store, and I could see that the other customers were equally shocked, some with their hands still frozen in the air as though they were waiting for something to happen. It wasn't just disbelief on their faces. It was a mix of relief, confusion, and amazement. One of the officers, now standing with his team at the door, stepped forward. "We've been tracking these guys for weeks. Johnny's been invaluable in getting us the information we needed," he said, his voice calm but filled with respect. "We couldn't have pulled this off without him." I looked back at Johnny, still processing the revelation. The man who had seemed like just another celebrity caught in a terrifying robbery was actually working with the authorities. He wasn't just a regular person. He was playing a pivotal role in taking down a dangerous group of criminals. Johnny flashed a quick smile, his usual charm returning as he looked around at the stunned crowd. "I know this may have been a bit much to handle," he said, his voice light and reassuring, "but trust me, this was the only way to catch these guys." It took a few moments for everything to sink in. The sirens outside had faded, the tension in the air had dissipated, and the once chaotic store had returned to its normal, quiet self. But this time, it was different. We weren't just customers and staff. We were witnesses to a dramatic, unexpected twist that none of us would soon forget. The aftermath of the robbery was surreal. The store, once filled with chaos and fear, had now transformed into a place of quiet relief. The robbers, now in handcuffs and escorted by the police, were taken away, and the tension that had gripped us all began to slowly dissolve. The staff, still in shock, slowly began to move, speaking in hushed tones to one another. Customers exchanged words of disbelief, their eyes darting between each other, as though trying to process what had just unfolded. A mix of emotions filled the room: fear, relief, awe, and then there was the overwhelming sense of gratitude. One of the store's managers, a tall woman with dark, curly hair, approached Johnny, her hands shaking slightly as she spoke. "Thank you. Thank you so much," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We thought we were done for. You saved us, all of us." Johnny smiled, but it wasn't the charming, easygoing smile I had seen on his face earlier. It was soft, genuine, and filled with humility. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression one of quiet assurance. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You're all safe now, and that's what matters." His words were simple, but they carried weight. It was clear that to him, the safety of the people around him was his priority, not the recognition, not the praise. It was as if he had done what any good person would do in that moment, without hesitation or fanfare. I stood a little farther back, watching the exchange. I had to admit, I was still trying to process everything that had happened, but more than that, I was reflecting on something deeper. I had underestimated Johnny Depp. I had seen him as just another celebrity, a famous face among many. I had assumed that his presence in the store, his calm demeanor during the robbery, was just part of his star persona, a kind of cool, distant character that people like me expected from him. But now, I realized how wrong I had been. Johnny Depp wasn't just a movie star. He wasn't just a man who happened to be in the right place at the right time. He was a person who cared, who had dedicated himself to something bigger than his fame, to something that truly mattered. His bravery wasn't just about stopping a robbery, it was about helping people when they needed it the most. As I looked around at the other staff members, I saw the same realization dawning on them. They had all been caught up in the whirlwind of the robbery, terrified and unsure of what would happen next. But now, they were witnessing a hero, someone who had quietly and selflessly stepped in to save them, without ever asking for anything in return. One of the customers, a woman who had been clutching her purse tightly throughout the ordeal, approached Johnny as well. "I don't know what to say," she stammered, her eyes wide with gratitude. You saved all of us. You were so calm. I can't believe it." Johnny gave her a gentle smile. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're all safe. That's what matters. Just remember to stay calm in situations like this, and you'll get through it." I had never seen Johnny in this light before. There was no arrogance, no sense of entitlement in him. He wasn't the larger-than-life figure I had assumed he was. He was just a man, one who had stepped up when others needed him, one who had acted with courage and compassion in the face of danger. The police, now wrapping up their work and getting ready to leave, gave Johnny a respectful nod. "Thanks for everything," one of the officers said. "You played a huge part in bringing this operation down." Johnny nodded back, his expression a mix of humility and quiet satisfaction. "I'm just happy it worked out," he replied, his voice calm. "You guys did the real work." As the robbers were led out of the store, Johnny lingered for just a moment, speaking quietly to a few of the staff members. He didn't want any attention, didn't want to be treated like some kind of hero. In that moment, it was clear. Johnny Depp wasn't just about the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. He was about something far deeper, something more meaningful. And then, with a final soft smile, he turned and quietly walked toward the door, blending in like any other person who had just been through something extraordinary. The doors closed behind him, and the store was left in stunned silence. I stood there for a moment, still processing everything that had happened. The situation had been dangerous, frightening, and unpredictable. But in the end, it had all worked out. Johnny had played his part, and now the robbers were facing justice. The store was safe again, and as I looked around at my colleagues and the customers, I realized something profound. Things are not always as they seem. Johnny Depp, the man we had all underestimated, had proven that true heroes can come from the most unexpected places. And in that quiet moment, I understood that courage, kindness, and humility were what made someone truly heroic. Not the fame, not the outward appearance, but the actions that came from the heart. Johnny Depp had been the hero we never saw coming, and it was a lesson I would carry with me forever. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this incredible story and the unexpected twist that left us all in awe. If you want to hear more amazing tales with surprises and heartwarming moments, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video with your friends. It helps us keep bringing you the most exciting and emotional stories. Your support means the world to us. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Have you ever experienced an unexpected hero in your life? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay tuned for more, and see you in the next story.